The toString method. So in your programs, we've been working with variables, and specifically we've been working with doubles and integers a lot. So let's say I have an amount of money, and let's say it's, I don't know, $50.25. Okay. I have a label with nothing in it, and I'm just going to bring a button here so I can click this button. So when I click this button, I want to throw money, that variable, in there, right? So if I click that button, I'm going to change the text of that label. Now, I have been guiding you guys to do something like this with your labels. You would say, you have plus money plus dollars. Okay, and there's no issues with this. You don't get any red lines. This works all the time. Let's just see what happens here, right? So this is what I've been teaching you guys to do. So if I click the button, you know, out comes these words plus the value of my money variable, which is 50.25. Okay, nothing new there. I've been doing that. I've been guiding you that way because if you update the text of a label to just include a integer or a double, it will not work. It will only work if you are concatenating your variable with other words. So we talked about string concatenation. Here's a string, and I'm attaching a variable, and here's another string. This is called concatenation. So if you didn't have that, if you were just trying to show the value of money in this label, you would get a red line. And you can kind of understand this now because you've been parsing. You've taken the text from a text box and you've parsed it into an integer. Well, now we're just going the other way. Dot text is a string. It's expecting words and letters. But money is not a string variable. Money is a double. It's a number variable. So we almost have to do the inverse. We have to convert the double back to a string. So luckily for you, this is actually quite straightforward, and Visual Studio almost always tries to help you do this. This is where the toString method comes in. The toString is the same as converting something to a string. So before we were parsing numbers to strings, we were parsing strings to numbers. Now I'm taking a double, I'm taking a number, and I'm converting it to a string, because the dot text property, after all, only works with strings. So you'll have to use this toString value, or this toString method, I should say, and then it'll work. Then you can see the value of your double popping up. Even though the variable's a double, we've converted it to a string so we can show it in the dot text property. Now, while we're talking about toString, this is a very powerful method because we can change certain things about this. So for example, one of the most popular ways to use the .toString is when you're working with money. I have a value here that represents a amount of money. However, when I show it as text, it doesn't really look like money. So what I could do is inside the toString parentheses, I could open up a pair of quotations and put a big capital C. C for currency, currency for money. What that does is it not only converts money to a string, but it also makes it look nice and pretty. It makes it look like a dollar amount. So now when I do it, I get the $sign at the front. And I know what you're saying. Well, all it did was add a dollar amount. But let's say you're doing some math with money and you're doing some division or some multiplication, and you got this really big decimal. We've been dealing with big decimals in our previous programs. They don't always look pretty. You would never say, oh, I have $50 and 0.256344646 But if the math came out to that, the toString will still handle it, and it'll still make it look nice. It even rounds up that 5 to a 6, right? It even rounds up that 1 penny amount. So a lovely, lovely tool, very useful, makes your life a lot easier. So anytime you're working with money, you should almost always be using the .toString as well as a currency conversion, if you will. And if you're not bored yet, another popular toString method is to deal with percents. So if you ever have a decimal, if you're familiar with math, you would know that percents can be represented as decimals. But typically when we're talking about percents or viewing them, we like to convert them to percents. So a decimal of 0.5 is the same thing as a 50%. However, in computer science, when you're doing math and you're dividing and you're doing these calculations, you're almost always doing the calculations in the decimal form. But we as humans do not like to look at percentages in the decimal form. So just like with the money example, if I ever have a decimal and I want to convert it to a percentage, once again, .toString, and then this time instead of using the currency modifier, we can use the P for percentage. And this is what we get. We get a nice, lovely 2 decimal place percentage with the symbol at the back. And without that modification, we'll just get 0.5, which is a little bit tougher on the eyes. It's a little bit tougher for the user. It's a little bit harder to interpret this number. Anyways, there's the toString method. It's very lovely, and it makes your life a lot easier in formatting your numbers.